So this day itself was one of the 94 calls to action put forward by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission as part of its final report in 2015. We are nearly 7 years on. So how many of those 94 calls have in fact been completed? John Northcott taking stock of that for us today. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Heather. Yeah, those two kids could give us all a lesson in how to view the concerns of the past moving forward in terms of how we have to come to grips with our history and how we have to reconcile some of that history moving forward. And you recognize the time factor in all of this. And many, of course, point out that this was generations in the making, and it will take even generations more to unwind. This is all coming from Beyond 94. This is a project from CBC where they went to all levels of society and government and community dealing with survivors to try to find out the best that they could in terms of those 94 recommendations, how many have been fulfilled. And you can see it there. Those numbers may vary community to community and assessment by assessment, but effectively still 10% only have been accomplished, the rest still unaccomplished. So let's walk through in terms of some of what we know that has been accomplished in terms of the asks of those 94 and the answers provided. The oath of citizenship now includes respecting Indigenous treaties, Indigenous rights to include language rights, university and college degree programs in Aboriginal languages, and of course many of them have a revised look at history as well, involving Canada's Indigenous people. Collect and publish data on criminal victimization of Aboriginal people. This is coming through Statistics Canada. It's worth remembering that all of these deal with everything from child welfare to education to language and culture, health, justice and reconciliation, and those are dealt with at so many levels of society, every level of government, the courts, educators, colleges and universities, social programs, all the way through every aspect of our society in dealing with those. So many of them not fulfilled yet. 19 by the CBC's count, including implementation of Aboriginal justice systems, royal proclamation of a reconciliation repudiating the doctrine of discovery. We saw pressure on the Pope to do that. A new king now, perhaps King Charles, will be able to address that in conjunction with the federal government. Publish an annual report on the number of Aboriginal children in care in Canada's corporate sector. And this, again, a broad societal call to Canada's corporate sector to adopt the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. So every aspect of society, some fulfilling and moving forward, others not. Still a lot to be dealt with. Heather? And
some are being dealt with, John, are they not? Some are very much underway.
Well, again, we look at that spectrum of what hasn't been acted on, what has been acted on, and then there is, or at least completed, and then there's that middle section, by far the greatest amount. 62 of them have not yet been, at least, I shouldn't say that, not completed, but have been undertaken. So let's look at some of those, and there's a long list, but so much of it is around the residential schools and the history there. While new focus was put on that with the discovery of the unmarked graves, still, so many recommendations of those 94 deal specifically with that, including informing families of where their children are buried, identification and maintenance of residential school cemeteries, records of residential school deaths to go to a National Centre for Truth and Reconciliation, and a registry of residential school cemeteries. Some action taken, but a promise yet unfulfilled on that. Here's one of the TRC commissioners talking specifically about that aspect.
Do whatever gestures they can do to show solidarity and support for and reverence for both residential school survivors who are still in our midst today, often without us even recognizing who they are in our midst, but also for the thousands that we now know without doubt to have died in residential schools. And may I say, the many thousands of others who did in fact survive the residential school experience, but who did not survive long enough to see any action on the part of Canada and Canadian citizens.
So while this day is about reflection, the fuel of reflection is knowledge, and there are so many areas to turn. The TRC report itself, which so many Indigenous activists and members of the community have exhorted the rest of us to read, well worth reading. And also Beyond 94, that CBC project, again, it goes through every single one of those recommendations and tells you the exact status of where it stands. Again, the request's made, the call goes out, and the answers still, in many cases, not given. Heather?
Thank you, John.
Okay.